In this presentation, I'm going to go through and review how to judge the class of trail. Alright, so remember when we judge trail at a horse show, it's really along the focus that you want to show the horse at the various gates throughout the various obstacles that are out there, and conformation really is not a factor. Remember, you as the judge, you really do control the class, and so you need to watch those competitors as they go through it. If they're having difficulty at one particular obstacle, they do get up to 3 refusals, and then you can go ahead and whistle or wave them on to the next obstacle if it's obvious they're not going to be able to complete it. Also, once the course is set up, it's very important that you as a judge do go through and walk the course. Don't just look at it, physically go through and walk through it. You want to make sure that it's safe, that it's set up, the distances are made correctly. When you first get the written pattern, you can also look to see that it's logical and meets the requirements of what the class needs to be. As you walk that course, make sure that it's logical and workable so that the horses can get through the course in a timely manner. Also, each association will have different requirements for what is required in the trail class, and you need to make sure that those requirements really have been met. Also, it is certainly up to you to go ahead and make some adjustments if some distances are not right, angles are wrong, because you want to be able to make sure those horses can go through the pattern and through the course so you can see how well that they can accomplish it. And it really shouldn't contain any tricks and things that they're unable to do. Alright, most associations do have rules as far as the course and posting the pattern. Most are going to tell you that it needs to be posted at least an hour before the class. Now remember, in today's day and age, many shows will print some type of pattern book, so many times it is included in that, but that's not a requirement. Also, I'm going to go through the rules that really apply to the American Quarter Horse Association, and various breed associations follow the same rules. It's very important that you as a judge go through and make sure that you know and understand what those rules are for the various different association that you might be judging for, because some of these things will vary from association to association. Many are going to have a minimum number of obstacles and a mandatory number of obstacles. Minimum typically is about 6 obstacles, and they're going to have things that are mandatory. For the Quarter Association, it's going to be that they open, pass through, and go through a gate. They ride over at least 4 logs, and they have a backing obstacle. Again, different associations are going to have different rules. For example, here with AQHA and many of your breed associations, they have to ride over at least 4 logs. They will have specific distances that those logs need to be, and these are really set for the horse's advantage, because with the stride of those horses, this is the distances that they need to be, and if you're not familiar setting up a course, you really need to make sure that they are set in these types of things. So walkovers need to be 20 inches to 24 inches, trot overs should be 3 foot to 3 foot 3 inches, and lopovers need to be between 6 and 7 feet. That makes those distances doable for the horse. Also remember that the distance is the path that the horse should take. So for example, it's going to go from the inside of this log to the inside of this log, and if this was to be a lopover, that needs to be at least 6 foot, and same with this one. On this, you need to look to see where the path the horse is going to be, and we will have some spokes. And so if this was a trot over, generally we look for the horse, then most of these poles are going to be marked. They're going to have lines on it, and so generally it's going to be this distance here is the path that the horse needs to take. So that was, say if this was, for example, a trot over, this should be at least 3 foot here and 3 foot here, so the horse can follow a doable line, and it's from the inside to the inside where those needs to be. Please remember that also for additional obstacles and unacceptable obstacles, that can vary between associations, so double check and make sure that whatever trail course you're handed does meet those kind of rules for whatever association you might be judging in. Some other things that many of the rule books will have are some suggested sizes, and so a gate should be it's recommended that they're 4 foot long and have a minimum height of 10 foot. Different obstacles will be elevated, so a walkover should be at least 22 to 24 inches apart and about 10 inches in height. There's also other dimensions and sizes and distances for if they're elevated on a trot over. Bridges are recommended to be a 36-inch width and at least 6 foot long in minimum. Sometimes now you do find bridges that are not just straight, and so that again is something you need to look at and make sure that it's safe and doable for the horses. So also years ago we used to put horses on the rail, and that's not been around for a very long time. So just remember they do need to walk, trot, or jog and lope on the course somewhere, and we never do rail work anymore. The course needs to be set so the horses can at least jog or trot 30 feet and at least lope 50 feet. Those distances can be longer, but that's what it needs to be so those horses can really get into that gait and show themselves. So when we judge this class and score it, it's very similar if you're familiar to doing reining, western riding, and those. It is scored on an obstacle score, maneuver score of +1.5 to -1.5, and we will have an obstacle score for every single obstacle, and that's on the quality of those maneuvers. Then, similar to reining and those other scored classes, we do have penalties, which I will go through here in just a minute, and this gives a standardization of the scoring for all the different exhibitors. So this is just a sample score sheet. Because every trail pattern is different, you as a judge will write along the top here what the different obstacles are. And then this portion is set very similar to exactly how we have for the other scored classes, where we will have penalties across the top. And remember, you only have those if a horse does incur a penalty. We will have maneuver scores across the bottom, and each box will have some type of a maneuver score from +1.5 to -1.5, going in half-point increments. Be sure when you have a person scribing for it that they use fractions and not decimals, because those can be very difficult to make sure that of what you have. All right, so to review some of the penalties here, and again, be sure that you check the association that you might be judging for, because some of these could potentially be different. Half-point penalties are going to be for every time a horse ticks a log, ticks a pole, a cone, or an obstacle. So anything like that he lightly touches it. It's a little bit of a judgment call if it's a tick or a hit, and that's kind of the sound, and you have to determine in your own judging and stay consistent amongst yourself what is going to be a tick and what is going to be a hit. So for 1-point penalties, each time they hit something, they bite it. Okay, we do have horses that will bite a bush and things like that. Step on a log, step on a pole, step on a cone, okay, step on a plant, or anything of the obstacles. Those are all 1-point penalties each and every time that they do that. So this horse, if he would step on this log, step on the standard of that would be a 1-point penalty every time that they do it. Additional 1-point penalties is if they break a gait at a walk or a jog for less than 2 strides. And all of these we do run into in trail, because as they're negotiating different obstacles, anything and everything can happen. Some other 1-point penalties, for example, I've got kind of an illustration here. If they split a pole in the lope over. So when a horse comes and lopes over, both front feet should go to this space, both front feet here, and both hind feet. When they split would be, for example, the right foot is here, the left foot is here. So every time they do it, it's a 1-point penalty. And I will tell you that, particularly when they're loping, if a horse splits it in front, okay, he tends to split it behind. And generally that's because they've met this pole, their stride is not correct. So a lot of times if they split the first one, they're going to split the other ones. And that's every time they do it, both in front and behind. Another 1-point penalty is if both front feet or hind feet are in the single strided slaughter space. So for example, here on this walkover, if this horse would put both feet into here, okay, that's going to be a 1-point penalty. So you really have to watch some of those things fairly closely. Some other 1-point penalties are skipping or failing to step in a required space. And so if a horse is walking through this and he reaches and he does not put a foot in one spot, that's going to be a 1-point penalty. Incorrect number of strides if specified. So we do have certain patterns that they'll say this is so many feet or this is so many strides. And so if that horse comes through here and does that incorrectly, adds an additional stride or adds an additional step or takes one out, then that's going to be a 1-point penalty. Sometimes they're specified and sometimes they're not, and you'll get with the course designer to make sure that you understand what has been told to the exhibitors. Okay, so moving on, then we have 3-point penalties. So if a horse breaks the gait at a walk or jog for more than 2 strides. So for example, he's jogging and then he comes down and walks for 4 or 5 strides, that's going to be a 3-point penalty. So this horse, if this is a jog through and he comes down and he missteps and he walks a stride, that's just going to be the 1-point penalty. But if he does it for 3, that's going to be a 3-point penalty. When they're loping, if they're out of lead or break a gait at a lope, that's going to be a 3-point penalty, except when they're correcting an incorrect lead. This again is very similar to the penalty that we have in many of our other classes. If they knock down an elevated pole, a cone, a barrel, a plant, obstacle, or anything like that, that's going to also be a 3-point penalty. So if you look closely in this obstacle here, it's elevated, and so if he would hit it with his front foot and then knock it down, that's going to be a 3-point penalty. Excuse me. Some other 3-point penalties are stepping outside the confines or coming off of an obstacle with 1 foot. So they're having to back around something and they take 1 foot off. They're going over a bridge and they take 1 foot off. That's a 3-point penalty. You'll see here in a minute, if they take 2 feet off, it's a higher penalty. The first refusal or try to evade an obstacle, they shy or back more than 2 strides the first time they do it, it's a 3-point penalty. They do it a second time, it's an additional 3-point penalty. Okay, so those are cumulative. So that if he shies twice, it's going to be a 3-point penalty. Missing or evading a pole that's part of a series of an obstacle with 1 foot, that's going to be a 3-point penalty. So it's along the lines of this one. So if they slip out of something just with 1 foot, they're not considered off pattern there. They are have just gotten a 3-point penalty if they do it with 1 foot. So we move into our 5-point penalties. Okay, if they drop something, drop the gate, something that they're supposed to be carrying, that's a 5-point penalty. Letting go of the gate or dropping the rope at the gate here, that's going to be a 5-point penalty. Now they have to pick that up and complete the gate or else they're going to be considered off pattern. So they can let go of it and drop it, but pick it back up and complete it. Use of either hand to instill fear or praise. This is one that unfortunately on some of our younger competitors we do run into. So they've gone through an obstacle and they want to pet their horse on the neck while they're still on course and with other obstacles to go. Each time they pet that horse on the neck, it really is a 5-point penalty. And actually what I tell exhibitors is don't be petting him and say good job until you're very for sure out of the course so you don't get caught on this 5-point penalty. Okay, if they step out or fall off an obstacle with more than 1 foot, that's going to be a 5-point penalty. So remember, just 1 foot is a 3-point. All of these kinds of things with more than 1 foot is a 5-point penalty. Like similar to many of our other classes, blatant disobedience, if they kick out, buck, rear, strike, all those different kinds of things, that's going to be a 5-point. And I will tell you honestly, we see a lot of kickouts with different things, and sometimes the horse gets frustrated. So the striking, those are probably the 2 that you see the most commonly. Then we have our disqualified runs, receive a score of 0. Okay, so they go outside the course, wrong lead or gate through the entire obstacle. Okay, so if it's a short term, that's a 3-point penalty, but if they never get the correct lead or they're supposed to be loping and they trot the whole thing, that's going to be a score of 0. Don't finish an obstacle or do them incorrectly, those are also going to be 0s. And this obstacles incorrectly are going to include if they over or under turn more than a quarter, and also if they come in or go out of an obstacle from the wrong side or direction. Okay, these are all really related as far as line of travel, touching the horse excessively to lower his head. Third refusal, they get each one before that. Remember what that penalty was, and now if it's a third time, they are considered off pattern. Use of 2 hands with riding with a curb bit, incorrect use of rommel, these are all going to be considered disqualifications. Again, touching that horse over its neck, doing the obstacles wrong, falling, not completing, all these different kinds of things are going to be considered off pattern. The only one is if you don't get the gate the open and shut the gate, and you're showing in the novice or rookie division for the quarter association, these are just placed below anyone that did not do that. So there are a few things like that. And again, many of those deals you have to really double check what association you're judging for to make sure that you do things correctly. So the best thing I can say is to go through and practice judging some various runs, know what the pattern is, make sure you walk it, and get it all down in your head. So I hope this has given you some good insight on judging trail.